Back in 2005, Hurricane Katrina barreled into New Orleans. Its devastation historic. The National Weather Service says Katrina was responsible for more than 1,800 deaths and more than $100 billion in damages. The scenes, both emotional and unforgettable, were beamed live into living rooms as the disaster unfolded. Here's a stunning look at some survivors emerging from the floodwaters.
How you doing? Are you all right? You okay? Where have you been? What did you do?
I've been pulling people out the water all night long. I done come all the way down there, must have brought about 50, 60 people back to the bridge. You know, it's the best place to go right now. It's higher ground.
What's it like back there?
I come from across the canal by Jackson Barracks. We was up in the attic all night and half of the day. The storm, it just came all at once. You know, the water was just about that high, just coming down the street, you know,
Wow.
so we had to stay up there until somebody came and got us today.
Wow.
And we walked across. They brought us to the foot of the bridge.
You all right?
Yeah. And then from there.
This your first time out?
Yeah, this is my first. Well, the second time I tried to get out in my truck, and while I was driving, the water came up the hill. I had to escape through the window.
What did you do? Just float around?
I jumped out the window. I kicked the window and jumped out.
And then what?
Me and him. And we got to land.
You all right?
Yeah, I'm okay, man.
What do you need?
I need somewhere to lay my head. I need some food. We ain't had sleep or nothing, man.
Look at this over here to the right. One after another throughout the day. One after another just coming up and out of the water. There's no one to rescue them. There are no boats to go out. They're doing their best, but getting into this neighborhood, it goes for miles. I mean, look over there. It's as far as the eye can see in every direction. Come over here just a little bit and you can see more. They're everywhere. And the sad thing is, when they come out of here, they come up to a freeway overpass right over here to your left. This freeway overpass, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people with no water, no food, no medical treatment, and no way to get it. Not now, anyway. Are y'all all right?
Yeah.
Is this your first time out?
Yep.
Where have you been?
In the project.
And how long were you up there?
Ever
since the storm?
Yeah, I lived there.
And this is your first time out?
Yeah.
In 2 days?
Yeah.
Is everybody okay?
As far as I know.
There's no way to really know how many people are still inside. Authorities say they're taking as many boats as they can. They have as many volunteers as they can use. But the area is just so enormous that they can't get to everyone. Are you okay?
No, I'm tired.
Have you had anything to drink?
Nothing to drink, nothing to eat, and I'm soaking wet. I am wet.
This lady's been stuck in an apartment since the storm came through. Then the floodwaters came in after that. Now they're just trying to get her to dry land. Once she gets here, there's no food and water, there's no medical attention, there's no shade, there's no shelter. At least for now, just like the rest of these people who are coming up out of the water, paying to the left over there. There's nowhere to go.
We need water, we need help. We really need help. They have sick people in the project, people can't walk, people can't talk, people can't see. You know what I'm saying? They got old people on the bridge. Can't get no water or nothing.
And this is where they end up, on a bridge over the city on a 90-plus degree day with no shade, no place to go to the bathroom, and no help. You can see the police cars coming through, and they do from time to time, but the police have nowhere to take people. The police have no medical assistance for them. They have no way to get them out of here because they have nowhere to take them. What are you going to do with all these people? When is help coming for these people? When is there going to be help? I mean, they're very thirsty. Do you have any idea yet? Nothing? Officer.
The eventual answer to that question, where is everyone supposed to go, was the Superdome. The stadium was damaged itself, but became a critical shelter for evacuees, and search and rescue efforts continued. Many took the harrowing walk to the home of the Saints, while buses came through if they could find enough fuel. Let's take a look.
The night falls and New Orleans becomes a much more dangerous place. Throughout the day, buses have been coming here just outside of New Orleans to take on fuel before heading into the city to evacuate residents who are becoming increasingly desperate. An overpass in New Orleans strewn with debris, garbage, and refugees. Thousands more outside the Superdome. Buses are streaming in to reach them, but even those who find a way out have a long way to go.
It was a tough trip, and also I'm looking for 4 people they think that went underwater.
And there is still so much water, a toxic mix of oil, sewage, chemicals, and bodies.
I will just tell you, it's heartbreaking. All of the relief workers that I have come across are in tears, and I'm talking about grown men crying.
And this woman in a wheelchair was moved into a basket. A helicopter hovering overhead plucked her to safety. But these missions are more dangerous now. Heavily armed police are on the lookout for criminals who have been shooting at rescue workers.
It may be in the form of handcuffs and shackles, but we will start securing these individuals. These individuals will not take control of New Orleans.
President Bush announced that his father and former President Bill Clinton will help raise funds for rebuilding New Orleans. But the city will first have to repair levees and flood walls, gaps so large that giant sandbags simply disappear beneath the surface. And many of those being evacuated by bus are heading for Texas. Texas initially agreed to take 25,000 refugees. Now it looks more like 75,000. In LaPlace, Louisiana, Doug Luzader, Fox News.
And as you just saw, search and rescue efforts were happening where they could, but thousands of people were fending for themselves. Basic necessities were in dire supply and nearly depleted. People began stealing supplies. The looting was a major talking point in the Katrina aftermath. Was it criminal or life-saving? Well, that depends on who you ask. Check out this scene here of a mother getting diapers for her baby.
Mississippi's Gulf Coast is clearly in transition now. FEMA is on the scene. They have even set up emergency medical facilities here at Biloxi's hospital. They are starting also to spread farther and farther out into the local neighborhoods as they clear the major streets. But for some, the help is simply not coming quickly enough. Cherie Chester knew she was doing something wrong, but the guilt of stealing diapers from this washed-out Dollar General store was outweighed by the need to care for her infant daughter. And waiting all day on long lines for such basics, she says, is a long shot at best, even in a town built on gambling.
Can't get to them. It's too much. By the time you get there, by the time you get through the line, it's practically dark and everybody's got to close up stuff.
The frustration is clearly growing among those who live along the Mississippi Gulf Coast. They see the utility vehicles, airplanes, and semi-trucks, but say little if any of it is trickling into their communities. And when they do find a distribution center, it isn't long before they're told, outside of FEMA, the system relies heavily on the goodwill of volunteers, like Melinda Bell, who came to D'Iberville Civic Center in need and was so inspired, she stayed to help others.
Started off as being a recipient for my 9-month-old, and I saw how much help they needed, so we just started to volunteer because they gave to us, so I'm going to help them. Yes, sir.
But even volunteers say their spirit of giving has its limits, and if the federal government doesn't do more to facilitate their selflessness, they may be forced to give up. Truckers, for example, who came to give help, are now refugees themselves.
Well, they told us they was going to have fuel and they was going to feed us and everything. We haven't seen it yet. So
he just asked me if I was willing to do another one, and I said, well, if the government would get their act together, I'd be more than happy to. But I'm not going to get myself stranded down here.
And the last thing anyone needs around here is more refugees, putting further strain on a system that is already driving some to desperate measures.
I don't know if it's going to be enough considering the circumstances that we're in. You know, it's crazy.
Still, emergency workers are asking people to be patient. There are clear signs of progress here. Just yesterday, this debris pile wasn't even here. It was in this street, which has now been cleared, allowing emergency workers to get in and people in neighborhoods that have been stranded to come out and finally begin to get some of the help that they so desperately need. In Biloxi, Eric Lasser, Fox 4 News.
Now, you heard in these reports victims of the disaster being called refugees. In the midst of reporting, media across the country was criticized for calling Katrina victims refugees, and still are to this day. It was more than semantics. Did calling the victims refugees versus evacuees have political or racial implications? It's part of a much bigger conversation about the way race, poverty, and privilege played a role in Katrina's story. We spoke to Fox 2 Detroit's Roop Raj. He was a reporter and anchor in New Orleans at the time, and he stayed in the city to help cover the storm, an experience that has shaped how he reports on the tragedy to this day. Let's watch.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. We are obviously discussing the Hurricane Katrina, which is coming up on its 20th anniversary. And I want to ask you, you were there for it all. So let's start with, what do you remember about when it actually hit?
You know, it's interesting because this is, at the time, the most powerful storm that the U.S. had seen, and the destruction that it caused with it was forewarned. We had heard days in advance that this would be a terrible storm. I think the National Weather Service said something like, unprecedented human suffering for those who don't leave. So there was an indication a day or two ahead of time that that could happen. But what was really odd is that the storm, which was barreling our way, all of a sudden, it seemed like it wasn't coming our way. It was going to go somewhere else. And like the pinball machine that the Gulf is, at the last minute, I would say, the weekend right before the 29th, when it was going to come through, we realized that it kind of turned and was coming right, the eye of it was coming right for New Orleans. So I remember I was sitting at a restaurant celebrating a friend's birthday in the French Quarter. And all of a sudden, I got the call that you have to go back to the newsroom and start talking to your team about how we're going to do this. I was anchoring mornings at the time. And so as a morning anchor on a Saturday afternoon, we were trying to figure out how this is going to look. What are we going to do? And our news director basically said, look, all hands on deck. But just so you know, this is going to be a really terrible storm. So anyone who can't be here needs to leave. And there was like this line in the sand in that moment where so many people in the newsroom said, I can't be a part of this. I got kids. I got an elderly parent. I got to get out. And those folks left. And the rest of us who remained just kind of looked at each other and were like, it's go time. And sure enough, I was on the air for 18 and a half hours leading up to the storm, straight through, anchoring coverage, just literally tossing to the mayor and the news conference with the different parish leaders, the meteorologists who did the bulk of the work to forecast the storm. But we knew it was bad, and we knew it was coming towards us that weekend.
And what did you notice about the media coverage of it?
Well, we noticed it right away because of the confusion around whether or not it was really going to come or not. There was kind of this doubt in the air. There was storm energy, if you will, but there's also a doubt in the air. Keep in mind, it was 2004, just a year before, when one of the largest evacuations in the history of Louisiana happened because of another hurricane called Ivan. And Ivan was also promised to come right to New Orleans. So everybody in one of the poorest cities in America packed their bags and found a way to get rides. And by the way, one of the most carless cities in America. The poverty there didn't allow people to just hop in a car. So people found buses and cars and friends. And it was like what they called contraflow. Everyone was leaving on I-10 and they opened up both sides of the highway to go one way out of town. That happened in 2004. So when the storm didn't hit, when Ivan went to Florida instead, everybody was like, see, they didn't know what they were talking about. And a year later, the same scenario was shaping up. So many people were like, you know what? This happened last year. I'm not leaving. And that was the worst tragedy of it all.
Well, and you make a good point. Let's talk about the idea of not having a car. We talk about these severe storms all the time and these disasters and how privilege plays a role in these disasters. A lot of these people say, I don't have cars. I don't have the money to leave. And how do you think privilege played a role in Katrina?
What a great question. And the simple answer is yes, a lot. It played a huge role. The people who had the means got out, and they were promised those who didn't that they would have transportation. Governor Kathleen Blanco, Mayor Ray Nagin, and the governor the governor of the emergency operations team all promised that these buses that were all sitting there would be ready to take them out of town. Well, guess what? At the last minute, someone realized that they didn't know how to get to the buses. They couldn't open the chain link fences to get to the buses. Some of the keys to the buses were missing. So there was no orchestrated plan from a federal, state, or local level, which allowed the people with the most privilege to be able to say, yeah, you know what, I think I'm just going to leave because I don't trust what's going on here. Meantime, everyone in the Ninth Ward, St. Bernard Parish, Slidell, these are areas that everyone had as household names back then. Poor Black communities, poor white communities, poor Hispanic communities, poor Vietnamese communities. The people with the least privilege were the ones who were left out. And it was the worst tragedy to hear in the moments after we thought we dodged a bullet when the storm came on August 29th. I was sitting at the Hilton Hotel, glass broken everywhere, no power, 100 degrees in the hotel, families staying with us as the media, and sopping wet carpet and not any water to drink. And as we walked around with broken glass everywhere, we realized people were getting sick and getting hurt. And we quickly realized that this storm had come and gone. And I remember hearing a transistor radio, someone was listening to the radio, and they said, we dodged the bullet. What they didn't realize is the levees broke. And no one reported that initially. They thought the storm came and left and we were good. And the sun came out and it was beautiful. What was not beautiful was hearing the cries. And I got to tell you, it's the eeriest sound. I've covered 24 hurricanes in New Orleans. When the power goes out and there's no ambient sound, the buzz of what a town sounds like, you can hear people yelling. And from their rooftops, you started hearing the chilling calls for help. And as we were walking from Canal Street, it gets lower and lower and lower. The French Quarter is the highest point in New Orleans. And Bienville, the guy who founded New Orleans, said, hey, no one should build below this area. Well, people built below that area, and they built the Ninth Ward and Tremé and those areas, and that's where the people were on the rooftops calling for help. We didn't dodge the bullet. The levees broke, the water was rising, and people were trapped.
What's something that just stands out to you that you remember from covering that period of time?
I remember that when you hear people looting, you often have like just kind of one impression of what that would look like or why someone would do that. What I realized during that storm was I had water in the back of my car in my old 2002 Chevy Trailblazer. And it was sitting out in the parking lot. And as we were going into kind of deep storm coverage, I got this break. And I went out to my car. And as I went to my car and popped open the hatch and grabbed the water, I heard someone screaming and yelling at me. And he came up to me and he put what felt like a gun, but I don't know what it was, right up to my stomach and said, crying, saying, give me the water. I have kids. And I said, absolutely, and gave him the water. And I literally walked back to the station and I couldn't believe what was happening. You ever have that feeling where you're looking around, you're like, is this real? It was that just surreal feeling. And just moments later, I saw the pawn shops that were right near this TV station that were on fire. And I heard glass breaking in the gas station across the street where I used to get my snacks from every day when I did the Today Show breaks. Between the 25-minute breaks, I'd go in there to get a snack. It was being looted. People were taking water. They were taking food for their family. And that hit me. That really hit me. Like, this isn't about stealing TVs and clothing. And perhaps there's different reasons that people loot and deeper meaning behind it and why people do it. And no one should be supported doing it. But if it's for water, no one seemed to have a big problem with it. And I don't blame them.
Yeah, exactly. How do you feel like race and poverty played a role in media's coverage of Katrina?
I think that's such an important point. Race and poverty played a huge role. It played a huge role because when the pictures were being broadcast around the world, the question that arose was, how long did it take after those pictures were broadcast across the country? How long did it take to get the help that was truly needed? Why did it take so long for the rescues to happen on the rooftops? And the question that everyone was asking was, if this storm happened in a community that was white and affluent or not a Black poor city, would the response have been quicker? And I asked that question not because I have the answer, but I asked that question because I think as Americans, we all should ask the question and answer it for yourself. I think the answer is clear that many poor Black cities are ignored, but the faces of those children and those elderly folks, you know, just as an Indian American guy covering this, who's married to a white woman and has friends of all different creeds and cultures, and I just kind of look at it, and I look at it differently, I think, a little bit, and I go, wow, what would it have been different had those people, you know, been in North Carolina sitting on a rooftop? And perhaps the answer, I would like to think that it's no, but I think there's some yes in there too. But here's the question. Why was there no preparedness? And that, I think, is the big question, because even if this happened somewhere else, would they have had the resources to get people out? And if they did, would they be coordinated well enough? It wasn't in New Orleans. And so I think it was the perfect storm from a federal, state, and local level of just complete irresponsibility and missing the mark on every single beat.
Yeah, before I let you go, what do you feel like has changed? Or do you think anything has changed in the way that media covers hurricanes and events after something so large as Katrina?
I think that it has changed. One of the big questions we asked right as soon as the storm passed was where were the leaders? Where was the help? And now what you see during hurricanes in the last 20 years is people ask that question ahead of a storm. And I think that's really important for reporters to be on the sidelines of these impending storm scenes and to ask the question, who's ready? Who's getting people out? Who has water and food? And those are preemptive questions that are now asked that weren't asked through Katrina. And I think that that's one thing that perhaps we've gotten better at, and where journalism plays a huge role. I always say, don't forget that had the reporters not been on the sidelines during Hurricane Katrina, those questions may still not be answered, because we have to hold people to account. And that's what people are doing now ahead of time, which I think is a great thing.
Anything else that you want to add before I let you go when it comes to covering such a major event as this?
We should never look forward to tragedy to cover. I think it really it alarmed me in the months after Katrina to hear about some of the journalists come to tell the story, but not truly understand the human cost. And I think that that's not the case with most journalists, but there are always bad apples in every industry. There are a lot of people who like shock value and are exploitive. And I think we have to be careful. These are people's homes. And when you, as we call it, ruin porn, walk through the streets of New Orleans and say, look at how awful this is, you are demonstrating the problem. But I think you have to demonstrate a solution when talking about those exploitive pictures of seeing people's homes and livelihoods destroyed. And I hope that people have learned that there's a sensitive way of reporting around the human story behind this, and not just saying a bunch of people on rooftops, but rather naming the folks on the rooftop and talking about their story and their families in the months after a storm. I think tragedy calls for humanity, and that I think as journalists, that humility to understand that our job is to serve and serve as truthful storytellers and in the first draft of history. I think that's critically important. I hope that that's a lesson that's taken away.
Adding to the conversation, you heard Roop talk about keeping the humanity in the face of tragedy. Here at Fox Local, we have two more unique perspectives from journalists who were living in Louisiana at the time. One evacuated and lost his family home, and the other had a teaching moment in her studies. Here's a snippet of what they experienced.
We talked a little bit before. Your family lost your home, correct?
Yeah.
And it had to be bulldozed, completely rebuilt?
Yeah, what ended up happening is the one thing about my particular neighborhood is that it is a low-lying flood area, meaning that water can accumulate from heavy rainfall really quickly. There's like a canal that was 2 blocks away from my home. So the combination of storm drains in the area not working, and then that canal overflowing just really in the heavy rainfall that Katrina dumped on the area really contributed significantly to all the heavy flooding. So there was a photo that one of my dad's friends who had evacuated sent us via email, which basically showed rooftops of homes. And that was like the only thing you could see because all the homes were submerged in water from the flooding. So he was able to take a photo of my particular block, and we could see the rooftop of our home, which is all we could see because, again, it was like, surrounded by water. So all that to say, yeah, the house was completely damaged from flood water and all the other toxins that probably built up from the area and the flooding. So the house over time, after we were able to go back to New Orleans back in, I want to say mid-2006, when city officials were saying it was safe for people to go back in and check on their property, looking at the home, it looked like not only it had been damaged by a flood, but also looked like being in a fire because there was so much mold. The walls were completely black. Everything was kind of gutted. The floors, everything was kind of like torn up from the very foundation. So the smell was terrible. And the other thing too that was happening is the only reason we were able to go back in the house is each home, if you recall, will be marked with like an X or some kind of symbol, just to let them know that the Corps of Engineers or like other officials in the area had went and surveyed the home, because that's what they were telling people. Hey, if your home had not been surveyed first, you couldn't go in there for safety reasons. But so we had like this when we first arrived to the home back in '06. In '06 we had like this huge X on the wall, like red graffiti, and then we like went in the house, and again it was unrecognizable. It was like so much damage you couldn't even. There was really nothing that could be done.
Yeah. So going back when you guys were in Dallas, and I think like all of us, we remember we woke up Monday, the storm hit, and the media was telling us that we think we dodged a bullet, but they were reporting from the French Quarter, and they didn't realize that these levees had burst and that the city was quickly flooding. What was your initial reaction? How was your family coping up there?
Well, it was tough. I think this difficult and harrowing experience kind of brought us together, because at the end of the day, we realized that's all we had was each other. We were all in it together, and we just had to just be there to be supportive anywhere that we could for one another, whether it was talking about it or even just finding other coping mechanisms, whether we were doing it together or individually. So I know one thing that helped was just us all being together under one roof in my aunt and uncle's home, and we sit around and have good meals and talk. And then of course it was on the brink of football season, so we had that to kind of fall back on, because we were all wondering, despite everything going on with the flooding, what was going to happen with the Saints, if they were even going to have the season or not, or if they're going to have to relocate. So that's kind of a few examples of things we did to just take our mind off of the incessant media coverage we were seeing about Hurricane Katrina, because after a while, you watch something long enough, you just need, even if it's like an hour or two, just something to divert your attention away from it, because it's just so jarring and upsetting.
Sure. I guess just this might be a good time to, I was a journalism student when it hit. I was in college, living a couple hours west in Lafayette. I remember I was staying at my parents' house because they were out of town. So I was staying with my little brother, and I had a house full of evacuees from New Orleans. And like you, we woke up and everything seemed okay. And by the afternoon, that had changed. And my friends realized that they weren't going home anytime soon. So then, as a journalism student, my professor had assigned us to go to the Cajun Dome, which is the event center in Lafayette, Louisiana, the arena where hundreds of evacuees were being housed, and interview people and talk to them about their experience. But at the time, I was just a student. I didn't have any press passes or anything. So in order to do that, I had to volunteer at the Cajun Dome. And I showed up and I was helping to sort clothes, that were donated for people who showed up with nothing. I mean, which was most people. And I think a couple of things really stuck out to me at that moment. Was one, I looked around, and I mean, there were hundreds of people lining the floors, right? And they showed up with nothing, obviously having no intention of ever going to Lafayette, maybe not even knowing, where they were. And then I realized that that so many cities across the South were experiencing the same thing. How many event centers were filled with these hundreds of people who just, had lost everything. And I think for me, that's when I realized the scope of what was going on. That's when it really hit for me. And then second, I remember distinctly the days, like the gaze in people's eyes, but like the days in their eyes. And it was so overwhelming for me. I was a young journalism student, and I could not bring myself to approach these humans who were obviously going through the most traumatic experience of their life and say, tell me about it, tell me about your heartache. And so I didn't. And I didn't do too well on that assignment.
Heather and Daniel, thank you. They had so much more to share and talk about from their experiences with FEMA and relocating and the city's rebuilding. You can watch their full interview on your Fox local app or online at livenowfox.com. Meanwhile, the recovery process for the city of New Orleans took years, with some areas seeing rapid restoration and some neighborhoods and infrastructure still affected today. But the grit and heart of NOLA is unmatched. Roop, Daniel, and Heather all see it still to this day, and you might too if you visited or you know the area. We'll leave you with this, a look at life and business coming back to New Orleans just 2 weeks after the storm. I'm Christy Matino. Thanks for watching this Live Now and Then.
This is the sound of progress.
Will, you know I want the big one.
On the surface, it looks like a typical summer day in New Orleans. Long lines at the snowball stand.
This pineapple?
An easy way to cool off. But scratch the surface, and you see, typical? No way.
Nothing's the same. It don't seem the same around here since the hurricane, you know.
The city of New Orleans is still reeling from the 1-2 punch it got from Katrina. Most of the city sits empty. 490,000 people are gone. For some, forever. There's a saying, so goes New Orleans, so goes Louisiana. So what happens now that New Orleans has stopped?
You can't replicate Mona Lisa. So, but nevertheless, I think we'll have enough people here and we'll have enough synergy going on. So whereas we'll be able to bring people back into this area and they will be able to enjoy themselves.
Councilman Byron Lee says it's simple. Jefferson Parish is ready to take over where New Orleans dropped off.
We'll have room and a solid infrastructure for them to relocate their businesses back here.
Just west of the city, Jefferson Parish is touting itself as the new New Orleans, a place where 450,000 live in 10 different cities, where the average salary is $10,000 more than in New Orleans, and where most people who live in New Orleans already come to shop. Officials here are encouraging old business to return and enticing new business with incentive packages. And if you take a look today, slowly but surely, you see life coming back.
We don't know about the business after everything get normal. We don't know how it's gonna be. It's gonna be okay, or it's gonna be like goes down or up.
Right now here, business is up. One of the only gas stations in the metro area. The lines keep going, and that keeps money flowing.
Linda?
And in an area where there's no power, hot pizza is a premium.
So if you look up at the screen over there, those pizzas just keep coming. We gotta work about as fast as we can. You know, people are hungry.
Hungry for a place that's returning to normal fast. And officials say that is Jefferson Parish.
3 weeks, I think, is what we're asking for. And I think when people come back, they'll be pleasantly surprised.
But really, can you really have Mardi Gras in Metairie? And what happens if the Saints, a $300 million corporation, pull up and head out? Can Jefferson Parish really shoulder that load?
We don't want Baton Rouge to steal our businesses.
And they don't want San Antonio or Los Angeles to steal its team. Residents say if you want to start rebuilding the city, start with the boys in black and gold.
It'd be better for the economy to have them down there so we can get, we can bring people back in, so build a city back up.
And if the second business moneymaker does abandon the city in its worst possible hour,
I think it'd be a boop hole.
Right now, everyone says things look bleak, and they do. And while football seems futile in times of tragedy, the Saints season motto is being adopted by the people. In Jefferson Parish, Louisiana, Nichelle Turner, Fox 11 News.